And by now it is a cliche. Donald Trump has to build the wall. Without it, his base will flee, the presidency will flounder, and his 2020 prospects will be doomed. After all, he's already running on promises made and promises kept. And what promise is bigger than his promise to build the wall?
We will build the wall 100%. We need the wall. 100%. Are you ready? Are you ready? And who is going to pay for the wall?
If you followed along with the campaign from home and saw that on your television or on your social media every single day, multiple times a day in some cases, and only heard Donald Trump supporters chant, build the wall, build the wall, build the wall, and heard Donald Trump bring it up over and over again, I would understand why you would believe that it is something that he must do. It is a promise that he has to keep. But I would counter no. No, he does not have to keep it. No, he doesn't have to build the wall. Listen, I spent a year and a half talking to Trump supporters, and there was one exchange I had with a man going into a rally in Ohio in late 2016. I wrote about it in my book. I asked this man, why do you support Donald Trump? Because he's going to build a wall, he said. What if he doesn't? I countered. I trust his judgment, the man said. In other words, in the eyes of Trump's base, whatever Trump is doing is the right thing, or he wouldn't do it. It is just that simple. So no, Donald Trump's base is not holding him to a wall. They never really did. The media has been holding Donald Trump to a wall, specifically the right-wing media that Donald Trump watches every hour of every day. And the president doesn't want that fight, at least not that fight right now. But here's the problem for Trump. He is supposed to be the guy who gets things done. He's the deal maker, the guy who gamed politicians for personal gain and would now go on to Washington to game politicians for the benefit of regular Americans. He was the one who was going to break the gridlock, make things happen. And sure, to some Trump voters in the base, that meant kicking out immigrants. And to others, it meant just fighting, whatever that fight may be. Fight, 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 fight. Some it also meant building the wall, but to a lot more that meant concrete accomplishments, not just a concrete wall. Arguably, Trump could make a decent argument here, or at least he could if he would focus on the facts instead of the fight. The economy is doing well. Unemployment is pretty low. Last week's job numbers were impressive. Manufacturing is seeing an unexpected turnaround. Wages are going up. But how long will the economy hold up? Look at the stock market. That's a question. And what else will Donald Trump be able to claim as an accomplishment if he keeps picking unnecessary fights or shutting down the government for 17 days and counting? Because here's the thing. Trump can't win in 2020 with just his diehards alone, just those ones who wouldn't care if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue. He needs the voters who were Trump curious or just frustrated with the status quo, the ones on the margins, the ones who wanted Donald Trump to get things done. And there were a lot of those out there. Mr. President, they give you a blank check on your behavior. You could do whatever you wanted and they would support you. But after running and losing big on immigration and the wall in the 2018 midterms, after throwing wrench after wrench into congressional negotiations, after shutting down the government, again now for 17 days, hurting the blue-collar workers you campaigned to protect, are you still absolutely sure those voters are with you, that those margins, the ones that really did put you into office, are going to hold? Because if anyone understood your unbelievable win, it was you. My question is, do you still?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.